Good afternoon, all the participants. On behalf of Physics Department of St. Xavier's College, I welcome you all. I welcome Reverend Father Principal for this occasion, for prayer and felicitation. Before that, I want to tell you one important thing. Actually, we have conducted this webinar, especially for the student community, because this seminar is also included with the career opportunities in the space telescopes. It will be more interesting, and we hope it will be interactive also. So at the end of the session, the participant can unmute their mics and you can ask the questions to the speaker, Dr. Khanna. So now, with these words, we can start the program. Now I call upon Ms. Lourdes Celcia, one of our students in MSc Physics, and she will host the meeting. Over to Lourdes Celcia.
A very good afternoon to one and all. Something somewhere incredible is waiting to be known. It's indeed my great privilege to extend a gracious and inclusive welcome to all of you to this webinar session on New Generation of Space Telescopes, Opportunities Unlimited, organized by the Department of Physics, St. Xavier's College. I wish this interesting and interactive webinar session to ignite us with the advanced and mysterious knowledge about space science. Without any further delay, let's start the event. Prayer. Prayer delights God's ear. It melts his heart. Now, I invite our respected principal, Reverend Dr. Mariadas S.J., to grace this occasion by invoking God's blessings and felicitate this event.
Thank you. Let me read Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. There is nothing I shall want. Fresh and green are the pastures where he gives me repose. Near restful waters he leads me. He revives my soul. He guides me along the right path for the sake of his name. Though I should walk in the valley of the shadow of death, no evil would I fear, for you are with me. Your crook and your staff will give me comfort. You have prepared a table before me in the sight of my foes. My head you have anointed with oil, my cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. In the Lord's own house shall I dwell for length of days unending. You shall close your eyes and pray to Lord. Lord, bless this day, bless this afternoon. Bless all of us who are gathered here virtually. Bless in a special way the resource person for this webinar, Dr. Dick Khanna, so that he can enlighten all of us on the topic given to him. Illuminate all of us so that we are open to the Spirit and listen to his sharing without any interruptions. Guide all of us in your path so that we all become an effective instruments in your hand. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. Respected HOD, respected coordinator, respected Dr. D. Khanna, the resource person for today's webinar on the topic New Generation of Space Telescope Opportunities Unlimited. Respected professors and my dear students, good afternoon to you all. I'm very happy to meet you this afternoon through this virtual platform as you are having this webinar on this particular topic. Because I'm totally alien to this topic, New Generation of Space Telescope, but I take the second part of this topic, Opportunities Unlimited. Definitely all of us know the opportunities are unlimited in front of us. How far we are making use of that opportunity depends on our interest, our desire, our dedication, our determination. Plenty of opportunities are in front of us. Only thing is we should be able to open our eyes and see that there is an opportunity. People used to say, a pessimist will always see a problem in every opportunity, whereas an optimist will see an opportunity in every problem. That is part of our life. Therefore, I'm sure this particular topic will help us to unlock our mind, to open our mind so that we are able to see the opportunities in front of us. And when we make use of that opportunity, when we are grabbing that opportunity in our life, we are the beneficiaries, not the other person. So that we will grow, we will be happy in future about our life. Therefore, on behalf of the institution, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to the resource person, Dr. D. Khanna, Associate Professor, Karunya Institute of Technology and Science, Coimbatore. Thank you, sir, for being with us, for accepting to enlighten us on this particular topic. I know you are terribly busy in the Karunya University. 2-3 years back, I visited that institute. And of course, you are registered, I think, Dr. John De Brito, no? He is from our institution.
Controller of examinations.
Controller of examinations. So he is from St. Xavier's, I know him. So thank you for accepting. I'm sure your topic is going to help us a lot to unlock the opportunities in our life, and we are going to grow. Thank you very much. I appreciate the organizers for identifying such a good and capable and competent and relevant speaker for this topic. God bless all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father, for gracing this occasion by your prayers and felicitation. Welcome speech. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is a progress. Working together is success. Now I call upon Ms. Kumudavalli of 2nd BSc Physics to welcome the webinar gathering.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to extend a cordial welcome to you all for this webinar conducted by Department of Physics, St. Xavier's College, Palayamkottai. One moment can change a day, and one day can change a life. This is not just another day. This is another chance to make your dreams come true. We all have gathered here to discuss on the topic, New Generation of Space Telescopes, Opportunities Unlimited. It's a matter of great pleasure and honor for me to extend our heartiest welcome to our beloved principal, Reverend Dr. S. Mariadas S.J. Welcome you, Father, for this wonderful session. On behalf of our department, I offer my heartiest welcome to our resource person, Dr. D. Khanna, Assistant Professor, Department of Physics, Karunya Institute of Technology and Sciences, Coimbatore. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation and spend your time with us. I wish to welcome our head of the department, Dr. D. Prem Anand, and our coordinator, Dr. R. Mary Janila, for arranging this wonderful and meaningful webinar for us. I would like to welcome all our department staffs who have rendered their valuable time in organizing this webinar. I'm truly delighted to welcome all the participants who have joined with us today to be a part of the session. Once again, I extend my warm welcome to each and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kumudavalli, for your heartfelt welcoming. Now, I call upon our head of the department, Dr. D. Prem Anand, to utter few words about the scope of the webinar and introduce our resource person.
Respected Reverend Father Dr. V. Henry Jerome, S.J., the rector of St. Xavier's College, Palayamkottai, and Reverend Father Dr. Alphonse Manikam, S.J., the secretary of our institution, Reverend Father Dr. S. Mariadas, S.J., the principal of our institution, and the convener, Dr. R. Mary Janila, the organizing secretaries, Dr. S.G. Rejit, Dr. M. Augustine, the moderators of this webinar, Dr. L. Arun Jose, Dr. M. Melvin David Kumar, Mr. R. Kristaraja. A very good afternoon to one and all. And I take this opportunity to welcome our speaker, Dr. D. Khanna, Assistant Professor in the Department of Physics, Karunya Institute of Technology and Sciences, Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu. And I would like to share a few words on the scope of this webinar. So the title of this webinar is New Generation of Space Telescopes, Opportunities Unlimited. Basically, this webinar series aims to explore the unfamiliar areas of the physics to the students and the research communities. Also, this webinar focuses on the career opportunities in the specific field. This will provide a platform for research scholars and teachers to get acquainted with the latest developments and trends in space telescope. Therefore, this webinar series is arranged to be more interesting and informative and interacting. So at this point or at this juncture of this webinar, I would like to share a few words on the basic history of space telescope, the advantages, the disadvantages, and what are the future of space observatories in this session. So I can say a space telescope or a space observatory is a telescope located in the outer space to observe distant planets, galaxies, and other astronomical objects. Space telescopes avoid the filtering of ultraviolet frequencies, X-rays, and gamma rays of electromagnetic radiation, as well as light pollution, which ground-based observatories encounter. Actually, the term space telescope was suggested by a scientist named Lyman Spitzer in the year 1946. So this was the first operational space telescope, and this was planned in the year 1946. And this space telescope are distinct from the Earth imaging satellites that point towards the Earth for satellite imaging, applied for espionage, weather analysis, and other types of information gathering. Space observatories are divided into two types. One is the astronomical survey satellites in order to map the entire sky, and the satellites which focuses on selected astronomical objects or parts of the sky and beyond. So what is the history of the space telescope? So the history of space telescope was started in the year 1837 by a pair of scientists, namely William Beer and Johann Heinrich Mittler, and they discussed the advantages of an observatory on the moon. And after the year in the year 1946, American theoretical astrophysicist Lyman Spitzer proposed a telescope in space. Spitzer's called for a larger telescope that would not be hindered by Earth's atmosphere. So after lobbying in the 1960s and the 1970s for such a system to be built, his vision ultimately materialized in the famous telescope known as Hubble Space Telescope, which was launched on April 24th in the year 1990 by the Space Shuttle Discovery. The first operational space telescopes were the American Orbiting Astronomical Observatory, or you can call it as OAO2. It was launched in the year 1968, and the Soviet Orion-1 ultraviolet telescope in the year 1971. So this is the brief history about the space telescope. And what are the advantages of this space telescope. So there are numerous advantages. To quote a few, the performing astronomy from ground-based observation on Earth is limited by the filtering and distortion of electromagnetic radiation due to the atmosphere. So to view this in mind, a telescope orbiting Earth outside the atmosphere is subjected neither to twinkling nor to light pollution from artificial light sources on Earth. As a result, the angular resolution of the space telescope is often much higher than a ground-based telescope with a similar aperture. Many large, say for example, many large terrestrial telescopes, however, reduce the atmospheric effects with the adaptive optics. Therefore, the space-based astronomy is more important for frequency ranges which are outside the optical window and the radio window. The only two wavelengths ranges of the electromagnetic spectrum that are not severely attenuated by the atmosphere. Let us take for an example, let us cite this instrument, that is X-ray astronomy. X-ray astronomy is nearly impossible when done from the Earth, and it has reached its current importance in astronomy only due to orbiting X-ray telescope such as the Chandra Observatory and the XMM Newton Observatory. Infrared and ultraviolet are also largely blocked. And these are the advantages of the space telescope. But whenever, if you speak an advantage, there will be a disadvantage. So what are the disadvantages of the space telescope? Is that the space telescope are much more expensive to build than ground-based telescopes. Due to the location, space telescopes are also extremely difficult to maintain. Take for an example, the Hubble Space Telescope was serviced by the Space Shuttle, but most space telescopes cannot be serviced at all. So these are the disadvantages of the space telescope. And what are the future applications of space observatories? So satellites are being launched and operated by, say, for example, organizations like NASA, National Aeronautical Space Administration, Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, and ESA, European Space Application, CNSA, JAXA, and the Soviet space program, later succeeded by Russia. In the year 2018, many space observatories have already completed their mission, while others...
Excuse me, I am not able to hear anything. Is HOD sir still speaking?
Yes, sir, I completed my speech.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir, for giving us the outline perspective of the webinar. Now, it's time to provoke our knowledge by knowing the marvelous and upcoming advanced space telescopes by listening to our resource person speech. Over to our resource person.
Thank you. I wish to thank Professor Melvin David Kumar at the outset for inviting me to give an guest lecture, New Generation of Space Telescopes, Opportunities Unlimited. I also wish to place my thanks to our principal, St. Xavier's College, Palayangottai. I also wish to thank the HOD Department of Physics, St. Xavier's College, for inviting me to give an talk. I hope I am audible. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, it's audible only.
Okay, fine. So now we are going to see a fantastic thing called space. We are going to see about new generation of space telescopes, And I will be also pointing out opportunities which are out there. My topic would be covering the following aspects. A brief history of telescopes, which was beautifully told already. Many points have been already covered by our HOD sir. I'll be also telling about the many windows of watching the space. Again, our HOD sir pointed out to many of the observatories. I'll be talking about the many projects which have been completed and which are going on, and what are all the future projects, and how as a student we can get there. This will be the contents of my topic. I wish to remember one very nice incident. When I was studying BSc Physics, in the month of August or September, there was a competition for many college students conducted at St. Xavier's College. I have come to your college and I have enjoyed the atmosphere there, and I thoroughly enjoyed the competition. And I think it happened in the year 1998 or 1999 during the times of Alexander the Great, last century. So Professor, our HOD sir, beautifully told the definition of a telescope. A telescope means a far-seeing optical instrument. But nowadays, we are including more and more electromagnetic radiation spectrum into all these things. A device used to make distant objects appear to be nearer and larger. Nowadays, it does not really capture the scope and full significance of modern day telescopes, because we are including all the electromagnetic spectrum into this fantastic thing. Today, the telescopes are having tremendous sensitivity. They are being operated over a wide range of wavelengths, and they make the invisible visible. Let me start with a brief history of telescopes. Now, I want to interact with the audience. Can anybody type in the chat box who discovered telescope? Who discovered telescope? Can anybody type in the chat box? Very good. We have an answer, Galileo. In reality, there were few more people involved in the discovery of telescope. In the year 1608, the Dutch spectacle maker Hans Lippershey filed a patent for spyglass, a 3-power telescope. But again, these kind of arrangements were previously known. His patent was rejected. The English mathematician and surveyor Leonard Digges, he had observed stars way back in 1550 AD. He has even written a scientific book, and he described his observation to his son. The year was 1591. English mathematician Thomas Harriot observed and sketched the moon 4 months prior to Galileo's momentous invention. So Galileo had the news of Hans Lippershey's spyglass. He improved the design. He produced a 8-power telescope and he presented it before the Venetian Senate. He improved the design to 20-power telescope and turned his telescope to the heavens, and he wrote The Starry Messenger in the year 1610. He discovered the Galilean moons, as they are called as nowadays. He discovered the 4 largest moons of Jupiter. He found many craters and mountainous surfaces in moon. He discovered for the first time in human history an astronomical object being orbited around other smaller objects. He discovered the phases of the planet Venus. Like our moon, planet Venus also have phases. He provided strong evidences for the heliocentric theory of Nicholas Copernicus, who lived before his time. So you are seeing an image of Galileo's telescope. It was having a 37 millimeter objective lens, 8 times larger than the pupil of our eye, 64 times more light collecting power. Now you can see one very important thing. As we go through the brief history of telescopes, you will be able to see the size is getting larger and larger, and we are finding more and more new things in the heavens. So that is the thing you are going to see. So you could see the stars that are 64 times fainter with this kind of telescope. You could see the stars that are 8 times farther away, and Galileo was able to resolve millions of previously unseen stars in the band of the Milky Way galaxy. When you are having a powerful telescope, as Professor was rightly pointing out in the initial beginning, You will have to have resolving power, magnifying power. All those things need to be more and more accurate as the days progress by. There are many problems with the early telescopes. It were basically of refracting telescope types. So they encountered chromatic aberration, spherical aberration. Due to chromatic aberration, images were shrouded in a blur of color. You know, when light ray is passed through a prism, white light, it is dispersed into its constituent colors. So each color will focus at a particular point, creating chromatic aberration. Then you have spherical aberration due to the shape of the lenses. Fuzzy images are produced. Many further advancements were made. So Christian Huygens created a 210 feet tubeless aerial telescope. It was a cumbersome process and it was presented before the Royal Society. So in order to avoid chromatic aberration and spherical aberration, telescopes with extremely long focal lengths were being made. They were good for studying stars and planets with small brightness. Then came reflecting telescope. So it was proposed by French theologian Marion Mersenne way back in the year 1636, even before Isaac Newton was born. Isaac Newton was born in the year 1642. And so you are able to see the image of Isaac Newton here, right? And this is Father Marion Mersenne, and this is Laurent Cassegrain. They proposed, they invented the first reflecting telescopes. Newton had a 2-inch, 25 millimeter, 35 power telescope, the first reflecting telescope, made up of a secondary flat mirror inserted into the light path, angled at 45 degrees to the axis, directs the light to a side mounted eyepiece. So you are able to see an image of the reflecting telescope invented by Newton. So light will come here, it will get reflected at the bottom, it will go to a secondary mirror, a flat mirror, which is at a 45 degree angle, and you are able to see the image through a side mirror. Primary mirror will be spherical in shape. So the tube is spherical in shape. It is made from speculum, a bronze alloy. It was polished and it introduced a yellowish hue. So we needed frequent polishing, and it also had low reflectivity, right? So there were many problems, but this was the basic thing which was used for the next 150 years. Then Cassegrain improved on this design. So he had a primary mirror, parabolic primary mirror, a hyperbolic secondary mirror you are able to see here. And then this will be reflected through a hole in the primary mirror. So you can view the image backside of the primary mirror, right? So many scientists and mathematicians, physicists were involved in all this kind of improvement. Then you have James Hall Nasmith. He had a different design. You know, Isaac Newton had a secondary reflector at a 45 degree angle near to the start of the telescope, and his viewpoint was somewhere around here, near to the start of the telescope. But Nasmith had a focal point at the bottom of the telescope, very near to the primary mirror. So this is Cassegrain design. You had a hole in the primary mirror. There are many advancements, many ideas which were given. Telescope can be directed anywhere without the observer having to move. So this was an advantage of this kind of design. Scottish engineer was able to design this kind of reflecting telescope, right? In the year 1849, he was able to design a 20-inch reflector. Now, Cowday system, it used flat mirrors, produces alternate focal point. You can able to see. So this is the incoming light rays. It is focused at a secondary mirror, and then again it is reflected by a tertiary mirror, and then you are having Cowday or Nasmith focal point. So many designs, so many innovations as the years went by, as the centuries rolled by. And in the 20th century, Bernard Smith invented the Smith camera. So primary mirror is again spherical aberration corrected by a weakly refracting glass plate. So you are having a refracting glass plate at the entrance of the telescope itself. So this was given by Bernard Smith. And you have a film holder here, right? So the images were taken as a photograph. And this was invented in the year 1930 by Bernard Smith. And these kind of telescopes are known as catadioptric telescopes. Catadioptric telescope, which contains both reflecting component and refracting elements. These kind of telescopes were optically fast. Our HOD sir was telling all sky survey and then particular targeted telescopes. So these kind of telescopes are very good for all sky survey. They are optically fast and they are having a wide field of view, right? An example is Austin-Schmidt telescope at Palomar Observatory in California, which is 48-inch in diameter. The mirror is 1.23 meter in diameter. You can see how the sizes are increasing. Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, again, so you have a weakly refracting mirror, and then you are having a reflecting mirror, and the images are formed at Cassegrain focal point, right? So it is compact, it is a large aperture telescope, it is popular with amateur astronomers. William Herschel built a 40-foot telescope way back in the year 1789, right? So the primary mirror size was 47-inch. But before that, he started observing the sky with double star systems with a 6.2-inch telescope. With a small telescope, he began to observe the sky, and he was able to discover the planet Uranus on the night of 13th March 1781 AD. First of all, people thought it was a comet, but it was not a comet. It is a new planet. So after this discovery, the interest in building large telescopes was enhanced further. Charles Messier, he made a list of fuzzy objects in the year 1781 because he was a comet hunter. Many a times these fuzzy objects were mistaken for comets. So he thought, okay, we will create a catalog so that people are not again going into the same thing time and again and to ascertain whether it is a comet or not. So he created a catalog of 103 objects. The famous ones are M31, which is now known as Andromeda Galaxy, and M42, the Orion Nebula. In the year 1802, a catalog of nebula and clusters of stars were made by Herschel and Caroline Herschel. We have women astronomers also. So many of the ladies, you may be wondering what role we have. So far, only gentlemen were coming, not even a single woman was there. Now you have a lady astronomer, Caroline Herschel. Quite very interesting. Many lady astronomers are there, but we are not aware of their existence. That is the problem. In the year 1840, William Parsons built the largest telescope at that point of time. He built a Newtonian type of model telescope, 6-foot mirror, that is 1.8 meter in diameter. It was known as the Leviathan of Parsonstown. Very, very interesting. You see, William Herschel was able to observe nebula. He was able to discover a new planet. Now you are able to see they are noticing spiral patterned nebula. Quite very interesting. Even at that point of time, they were not aware of galaxies, but they were able to discover the spiral patterns of the galaxy. They were able to discover Crab Nebula and so on. So you need to track the stars. You can build large telescopes. You can do a lot of engineering improvement, but how will you track a star? The mount on which a telescope is mounted itself had many engineering marvels. So I am not going into that detail, but first improvement was done in the year 1720. He invented a practical altitude azimuth mount. And in the year 1960s, American astronomer John Dobson invented Newtonian telescope, which is very, very popular among amateur astronomers, right? You can have a size up to 0.5 meter by Dobsonian telescope. Nowadays, you have computer controlled movements. Telescopes are rotated about both the axes. So you have something called as declination. You have called something called right ascension. Right ascension, you can equate that with longitudes of our map, world map, and declination. You can map this with the latitude in our world map, right? So now you are able to see Subaru telescope, which is a very modern day telescope. You have to track the star. The stars are continuously moving. Are the stars moving? No. Stars are fixed in a celestial sphere. So Earth is moving. So in order to compensate for the rotation of the Earth, you have to move the telescope. So many improvements were made in the design of the stand of a telescope, equatorial mounts and all these things. You are able to see one significant type like that. Now, reflecting telescope, we are talking about reflecting telescope so much. At the same time, there were improvements in refracting telescope. In the year 1733, Chester Moore Hall solved the chromatic aberration problem. He had an achromatic doublet, a combination of concave as well as convex lens. Convex lens will refract red light less than blue light, but concave lens will be doing the opposite. It will refract blue light less than the red light. So when you put them together, the problem is solved. And this is a masterpiece idea from Chester Moore Hall. He placed the two lenses together. And then in the year 1758, John Dolan, an English optician, developed doublet concept, bigger size doublet concept, 12 centimeter objective lens. You remember the first optical lens used by Galileo was very, very small, right? It was 3.7 millimeter or something. It was very, very small, right? It was 37 millimeter or something. So in the year 1820s, Fraunhofer, he made 24 centimeter diameter doublets. And as you are able to see, you are seeing the image of 40-inch, 1 meter instrument, Yerkes Observatory, Chicago. And it was done by Georges Ellery Hale, an American astronomer and entrepreneur. So many successful refractors were being made, but it is the reflecting telescope which is ruling the roost now. Why so? Because of many reasons, right? We are able to create, we are able to manufacture large and stable, highly reflective mirrors possible. So this was the reason for reflecting telescope to gain an upper hand. Large and stable and highly reflecting mirrors were made, and they were very stable. They were much suitable for astronomical observations. So we need to go deeper into space. If you want to go deeper into space, what is the problem? We need bigger telescopes. Why we need bigger telescopes? Bigger telescopes will capture more photons, and bigger telescopes will have bigger mirrors. So we need bigger telescopes. So what are the achievements so far we have made with these kind of smaller and intermediate sized telescope? The smooth Milky Way galaxy structure was resolved into millions of stars. Herschel was able to find new planet, and he was able to catalog thousands of nebula. Parson was able to discover spiral patterns in the nebula. These are the things which we have discovered so far. Now comes the size of the universe. When you want to note the distance of an astronomical object from the Earth, in those times they used parallax method. In the month of June, if you observe a star, it will appear here against a background of distant stars. After 6 months, you are at the other side of the sun. So in the month of December, if you observe, the star will move like this and against the fixed background of the star. So there is an angle. So this is triangular parallax method. You can find the distance by basic trigonometric principle. So first of all, they were able to discover the distances for 100 stars, which were some 100 light years away. They were able to observe two groups of nebula. One nebula, smooth and luminous cloud, they were having. Another type of nebula, they were having smooth and milky appearance, and they were not having no discernible stars. The first type of nebula, they were peppered with young stars. So how can we measure the distance of even farther objects? We needed a standard candle method, which has a standard luminosity. So we have to measure the apparent magnitude, a magnitude of the star, which is really appearing there. We have to study the intrinsic luminosity. If we know the apparent magnitude and the intrinsic luminosity, we can measure the distance by applying inverse square law. Here comes another women astronomer, Henrietta Swan Leavitt. She is from Harvard College Observatory. She was able to measure Cepheid variables. So Cepheid variables are stars which pulsate like beacons. So you have lighthouses, right? So lighthouses, they have a definite periodicity. There are many, many lighthouses along the coastal line of India. They have their own luminosity and different periods. Henrietta Swan Leavitt was able to discover period luminosity relationship. Once this was established, we were able to measure the distances of these kind of Cepheid variables. We were able to measure the brightness and period of the Cepheid. Because of that, we were able to measure the distance. This is quite very interesting. After this point of time in human history, phenomenal discoveries are being made. In the year 1908, George Hale commissioned 1-inch Cassegrain telescope on Mount Wilson, Los Angeles, and Harlow Shapley, using this telescope, he studied the globular clusters, and they are densely populated spherical star system, which are having millions of stars. In the Milky Way galaxy, near the center of the Milky Way galaxy, you are having globular star clusters. Shapley discovered Cepheid variables in these globular clusters, and he was able to discern the distance, and he was able to tell Sun is not near to the center of the Milky Way galaxy, it is at the outer edges of the Milky Way galaxy. When you have more and more powerful telescopes, when you have more and more big telescopes, you are able to make more great discoveries. People were not able to come to a conclusion whether galaxies are nebula or they are an island universes like our own Milky Way galaxy. Andromeda was thought to be a nebula some years before, 100 years before. But when bigger and powerful telescopes came, it was able to resolve the stars of the Andromeda galaxy. And finally, it was settled that Andromeda Nebula is not nebula anymore, it is galaxy. But in the year 1920, there was a debate between Shapley and Curtis. Shapley was telling spiral nebula are within our own galaxy, whereas Curtis was telling spiral nebula are island universes. And George Hale obtained fund from John Hooker and Andrew Carnegie. He built a 100-inch Hooker telescope, and it was the largest telescope till 1948. And it was one of the most important since Galileo's telescope for various reasons. Edwin Hubble used this telescope to take photographs. The result, M31 was resolved. Andromeda Nebula has been promoted to Andromeda Galaxy. You know, recently they demoted the Pluto status to dwarf planet. Recently in India, they demoted Jammu and Kashmir to Union Territory. It was a state before. Now it has been demoted to Union Territory. Just like that, right? This has been promoted, not demoted. Andromeda Nebula has been promoted to Andromeda Galaxy. Hubble was able to measure Cepheid variables in M31. And he was able to determine the approximate distance, which was 1 million light years. It was well outside our own galaxy. So now what are the important discoveries we have seen so far? Spiral nebulae are external galaxies. They are comparable with our own Milky Way galaxy. You know Doppler shift. As physicists, we all are aware of Doppler shift. In the year 1942 AD, Christian Doppler, an Austrian physicist, he proposed the Doppler shift, the waxing and waning of a siren sound of an approaching ambulance. The same thing can be applied to astronomy. If an object is moving away from Earth, the light from it will be redshifted. If an object is coming towards the Earth, the light from it will be blue shifted. So when you measure the shift, you can find the radial velocity in the same line of sight. For example, if you are measuring a galaxy which is having a redshift of 0.1, it means that it is moving away from us with 10% of the speed of light. That is 30,000 kilometers per second. In the year 1912, Westo Slipher measured the redshift of the galaxy. 17 galaxy redshifts were measured by the year 1917 AD. By the year 1925 AD, over such 40 measurements were made. Most of those galaxies were moving away from us with high radial velocity. So Hubble was able to create a plot, and he measures the distance, and he discovers the famous Hubble law. So V is equal to h0r, where h0 is the Hubble constant. Of course, it was not a constant. It has been refined so many times in the past years. V is the recession velocity, or is its distance from the Earth. With all these kind of powerful telescopes, Hooker telescopes revealed a dark side of the universe. So they are looking at clusters of galaxies. They are calculating the virial mass, the real mass needed for keeping the cluster together. But when they are observing, they are not able to discover that much mass in the observable star clusters and galaxies. So what is the result? Most of the mass in a cluster of galaxy is dark. So dark matter concept was evolved because of a powerful telescope. During World War I and II, there was a revision of Hubble law, and there was an approximate estimation of the distance, more accurate measurement of the distance of Andromeda galaxy and so on. Now, George Hale, in his later years, he pours his mind into develop a much bigger telescope, 200-inch telescope on Palomar Observatory, Los Angeles, and it was online from the year 1949 AD, and it was a huge mirror. You needed mechanical support by applying correcting forces. It played a very big role in astronomy for the next 3 decades, and it was able to identify the first quasar in the year 1963. So far, we have witnessed only one type of telescope, that is optical telescope. But we know that there are many different types of windows, right? So now you are able to see the images of our own galaxy in X-ray, and you are able to see, I'm sorry, I think there are 2 slides missing here. First of all, there will be an electromagnetic spectrum. So you know, electromagnetic spectrum includes gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet rays, infrared rays, microwave rays, and radio waves. So you are having 7 parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, and you are having visible range. So far, we have talked about only visible range, but you are having X-ray astronomy, infrared astronomy, microwave astronomy, radio wave astronomy. You are able to observe Milky Way at many different wavelengths. There is a gamma sky, X-ray sky, optical view of our own Milky Way galaxy center, Then you have near infrared, far infrared, mid infrared, molecular hydrogen, radio wave measurements. You can also have ultraviolet measurements. And this is Hubble Ultra Deep Field, one of the most famous images ever seen. As our HOD sir was telling in the earlier part of the lecture, you are having gamma rays and X-rays and ultraviolet rays completely blocked by the upper atmosphere. The visible light is falling into the Earth's atmosphere. You can see visible light through the Earth's atmosphere. And then most of the infrared spectrum, they are absorbed by, again, our atmosphere. Then you have microwave. Most of the microwave will be absorbed by the Earth's atmosphere. Radio waves are observed from surface of planet Earth, right? Again, long wavelength radio waves can be blocked by Earth's atmosphere. So you have a window, and all other observation has to be done from space. You cannot do it from surface of planet Earth. You are able to see a visible image of Centaurus A and a radio image of Centaurus A. Both the things are coupled together, and you are able to see few things which are not visible in the visible image. Radio jets which are coming from the center of the Centaurus A galaxy. So far, we were seeing only about optical telescopes, but so much of projects have come across in other windows of heaven. Gamma rays. Gamma rays are indicator of very hot universe. So you have cosmic gamma rays ranging from 100 kilo electron volt to 100 tera electron volt. Now that is an order of 10 power 9 multiplication from kilo to tera. Kilo is 10 power 3, tera is 10 power 12. So there are many mechanisms which produce gamma rays in the space. I am not going to talk about that in detail. Synchrotron radiation, inverse Compton scattering, Bremsstrahlung, the breaking radiation, radioactive decay, annihilation of matter and antimatter. Many mechanisms will produce gamma rays in the space. It was discovered by accident in the year 1960s by Vela satellites when they were trying to discover nuclear bomb burst by Soviet Union and China, but they discovered gamma ray burst. Gamma ray bursts are extremely intense flashes of light, and they last from 0.01 second to 10,000 seconds. European Space Agency launched COSB, which measured the gamma ray energy up to 50 million electron volt. In the year 1991 AD, Compton Gamma Ray Observatory was launched from Space Shuttle Atlantis. It measured the gamma ray energy from 20 kilo electron volt to 30 giga electron volt. And then in the year 2002, International Gamma Ray Astrophysics Laboratory was launched. In the year 2004, Swift Observatory was launched. In the year 2008, Fermi Gamma Ray Observatory was launched. And this is an observatory, I think, which is still there in space. So what are the important discoveries we were able to make? Vela satellites were able to discover for the very first time powerful gamma ray burst. The European Space Agency's satellite was able to observe Crab and Vela pulsars, Cygnus X3 binary star system, and then quasar. Compton Gamma Ray Observatory was able to identify gamma ray burst from every direction. And it was able to identify one particular gamma ray burst, which is 9 billion light years away, which had enormous intensity. To have that kind of intensity, you need to convert 2 masses of the sun into complete energy. So active galactic nuclei was identified by Compton Gamma Ray Observatory. Intergal Observatory was able to observe the accretion disk around black holes. There are so many interesting facts which were able to be discovered by these gamma ray observatories. Swift Space Observatory was able to discover the most distant gamma ray burst. Fermi was able to observe the brightest gamma ray burst so far identified. It has identified a huge X-ray emitting bubble supersonic motions of gas in supernova remnants. Then we come to X-rays, X-ray photons. So the photon energy, you are able to see it is from 100 electron volt to 100 kilo electron volt. The first X-ray observations were made from suborbital sounding rockets. The first observations were made about the sun. In the year 1962, the first extrasolar source of X-ray was discovered, which is Scorpius X1 and X-ray binary. So two stars will be rotating around a common center of gravity. One star will be a donor, a normal star, which is losing its gaseous material. The second star, which is known as the acceptor star, will be either a neutron star or it can be a black hole. It will get the material from the neighboring star. These are called X-ray binary. The falling gas is heated so intensely that it will emit X-rays. Crab Nebula was identified in the year 1964 as a supernova remnant. Variable star sources, active galactic nuclei. So AGN stands for active galactic nuclei. A diffuse X-ray background was identified by these kind of space-based X-ray observatories. In fact, in the year 1970 AD, Uguru Space Telescope was launched. It discovered so many interesting facts: X-ray binaries, pulsating stars, supernova remnants, galaxies, quasars, clusters of galaxies, and hot intergalactic plasma. We will wait here for a couple of minutes and we will see what we have understood so far. Optical telescopes were able to tell the structure of galaxies. It was able to tell clusters of galaxies. It was able to tell in a less amount of matter that there is something called as black matter or dark matter. Then we have come to gamma ray astronomy. Gamma ray astronomy revealed the fact there are extreme events going in the space. Now we have come to X-ray observatory. X-ray observatory tells us so much of interesting information about the type of stars, supernova remnants, the active galactic nuclei, so many other interesting information it is able to give. The space between galaxies in large clusters are filled with very hot plasma. This was another information given by X-ray observatory. So again, they calculated the matter density in a cluster of galaxies. They included these very hot plasma also between galaxies in a cluster of galaxies. And they were able to identify, even if you include this very hot plasma, you cannot account for the entire mass of the cluster of galaxy. So again, it indicated to the presence of dark matter. And in the year 1978, Einstein X-ray Observatory was launched. In the year 1990, Rosette was launched. In the year 1999, X-ray multi-mirror mission. So our HOD sir indicated about this thing, XMM Newton. This mission was launched, and you are able to see the wide range of photon energies which they are dealing with. Rosette was able to discover soft X-ray sources in the sky. It created a catalog of 15,000 sources. Supermassive black holes was identified at cosmological distance scales. Now, let me ask you a question. If you know the answer, you can answer in the chat box. Do we have a supermassive black hole at the center of Milky Way galaxy? Do we have a supermassive black hole at the center of Milky Way galaxy? So we are having Sanjay Kumar, we are having Jacqueline Janila in our meet. We are having Krishna Krish in our meet, Sahayam in our meet. So yes. So we are having wonderful answer from the participants. We are having a supermassive black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy, right? So NASA in the year 2012 launched a space mission called Nuclear Spectroscopic Telescope Array. And it was able to tell us supernova and quasars in much detail. It was able to identify a magnetar, a star which is having trillions of times more powerful magnetic field than the Earth's magnetic field. Magnetar, which is a light year away from the center of our Milky Way galaxy, which revolves around the supermassive black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy. And we are able to test Einstein's general theory of relativity by noting the movement of these kind of stars around the center of our Milky Way galaxy. Now we come to the hot universe, ultraviolet. The photon energies which we are concerned is from 3 electron volt to 100 electron volt. Now you see, we are now moving to young and massive stars. Young and massive stars radiate much of their energies in this range. And we are able to study the star forming regions because of this ultraviolet ray astronomy. We can use reflecting telescope. The mechanism for gamma rays and X-rays are different. The mechanism for ultraviolet ray telescope, it is different, right? So first of all, there were yearly balloon and rocket flights. There were 4 orbiting satellites launched by NASA in the year 1966 to 1972. So one particular such telescope called Copernicus was able to take ultraviolet images of hundreds of stars, and it was able to discover many pulsar. Pulsar is pulsating radio object, fastly spinning neutron stars. In the year 1978 to 1996 AD, there was International Ultraviolet Explorer, and it was able to see young hot stars, their stellar winds, white dwarf stars, fast transition events in active galactic nuclei. You are able to see one beautiful picture coming before your eye. Each kind of astronomy, whether it is gamma ray astronomy, whether it is X-ray astronomy, whether it is ultraviolet astronomy, they are having their own field of study. They are having their own celestial objects of interest, and they are expanding our knowledge of the universe, right? So it was able to study the supernova remnant in large Magellanic Cloud, and it was able to identify the star which exploded as a supernova. It was a blue supergiant star, and it is a very, very interesting supernova. Can I take another 10 minutes to 15 minutes? The time is already 45 minutes. Can I take another 10 to 15 minutes? Okay, so I will take another 10 to 15 minutes. I thought of finishing my lecture within 45 to 50 minutes. Now it is already 45 minutes. The supernova remnant in large Magellanic Cloud was witnessed by a human being, eye to eye, in the year 1987.
Sir,
he was.
Yes, sir. Sir, you can take your own time, sir. No problem. Time is not limited. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Like your opportunities. Time is unlimited.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So, in the year 1987 AD, a person who was walking in the field of Argentina mountains, he suddenly saw a star bursting right before his eye. And it was also witnessed by this International Ultraviolet Explorer space probe, which operated in ultraviolet region, right? And then in the year 2003 to 2013, they had Galaxy Evolution Explorer. It measured several 100 million sources. It observed hot young stars in galaxies. Friends, I'm sure that you are able to observe one thing. When you are having more powerful telescope, when you are having a bigger telescope, the data which is coming into the computer is just mind-boggling. In a lifetime, we are able to observe so many thousands of stars. But using these kind of astronomical observations, these kind of space observations with international collaboration, you are able to observe several million stars. And that is where you have unlimited opportunities. They have huge opening in many of these very interesting fields. Then Hubble Space Telescope. Our professor talked very beautifully about all these things. It was the brainchild of Lyman Spitzer, and he was American astrophysicist. And in the year 1946, he proposed this idea. It was possible only in the year 1990s, as you are able to see. Finally, Hubble Space Telescope was launched, and it is a 2.4 meter Cassegrain reflected type telescope. It operated in near IR to ultraviolet range, and full visible range was visible to this Hubble Space Telescope. It refined the Hubble constant. It gave planetary features with great clarity. It was able to discover auroral rings around Saturn and Jupiter, discovered several new moons of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Lots and lots of achievement was done by Hubble Space Telescope. If I talk about Hubble Space Telescope, it will take another 2 or 3 days. It was able to discover protoplanetary disk. High resolution images of thousands of galaxies was given by Hubble Space Telescope. It was able to measure supermassive black hole. So SMBH is known as supermassive black hole, right? And it was able to measure that thing in a very accurate sense, right? And finally, it was able to give us the Hubble ultra deep field images. It was able to focus on a particular part of the sky. 100 long hours of exposure was given. It captured the faint light it received from extremely distant galaxies, and it absorbed the most distant and the oldest galaxy GN-Z11, 13.4 billion light years away from planet Earth. So it was able to give us yearly galaxy images. So much of information was given by Hubble Space Telescope. And it also used the gravity of a cluster of galaxies to bend the light. That was another amazing thing done by Hubble Space Telescope, right? Then we have Kepler Space Telescope. In the year 2009 AD, Kepler Space Telescope was launched with a specific aim in mind to discover exoplanet around stars within a radius of 3,000 to 4,000 light years from the solar system. Many new solar systems have been discovered. Many habitable exoplanet has been discovered. It has surveyed nearly 1.5 lakh stars. In the year 2015, it made a phenomenal discovery, a twin Earth Kepler 452b system, which is 1,400 light years away. And it also launched the Zooniverse project. Many important discoveries were made by Kepler Space Probe, right? So nearly 3,000. Now, as of now, so far we have discovered nearly 5,000 exoplanets by various other means also. Kepler was able to identify more than 3,000 of these kind of exoplanets. It was able to identify the stars which are having a planetary system like our own solar system. And you are able to see such kind of star systems and their habitable zone. You are able to see solar system here, and you are able to see the Kepler 22 system here. There are many solar systems, right? This is not a real image. This is an artist image and picture. This is not a real picture. This is a drawing. On Earth, the sunrise or sunset will look something like this. On Gliese 667 CC, this sunset will be looking something like this, and you are able to see F and E planet in this kind of planetary system. More or less similar. Sunsets on exoplanets, right? There are many nice and interesting system. The Kepler 452 system, which I talked about. Friends, as I tell you, so much of data is being created by different techniques. Astrometry is one such technique. So it was first propounded by Greek astronomer Hipparchus. So it makes a catalog of position and brightness of celestial objects. Astrometry. You are measuring stars. Astro means stars, right? Asteroid means star-like. Astro means stars. So you are measuring the position and brightness of several celestial objects. And there are many space probes which were launched, like Hipparchus, Europeans Gaia satellite, which surveyed 1 billion Milky Way star, position, parallax, proper motion, luminosities of stars are being measured by astrometry, right? So the data flow is very huge. We need years of work even to decode the already collected data. Here, I want to point out, you have some opportunity, right? For observing our sun, we have launched Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, Solar Dynamic Observatory. We are able to see solar winds, coronal mass ejection. We are able to predict the space weather within our own solar system. Recently, we have launched Parker Space Probe. There is a huge opportunity for youngsters in working along with Parker Space Probe. Infrared. So infrared rays are used to discover faint galaxies. 3,50,000 galaxies were discovered. Active star forming galaxies are discovered. Active star forming galaxies. Ultra luminous infrared galaxies are discovered. Faint wisps of emission above the plane of Milky Way galaxy was discovered. Through infrared astronomy, we are able to capture the nucleus of our own galaxy. So much of advantages. Spitzer Space Telescope, which was told by our professor, it collected data on interstellar medium, star formation regions in the nearby galaxies. You are able to see the different astronomical observatories are having different aims and different objectives. And you are having huge opportunities in all these different kind of observations which are being made on a daily basis. The heat of a large exoplanet was first observed by Spitzer Space Telescope. A hot Jupiter was identified. It also identified unknown rings around Saturn. They launched Hertz Space Observatory. It was able to identify molecules in galaxies, chemical composition of solar system objects were observed. Then cosmic microwave background. Cosmic microwave background is a consequence of the expansion of the universe. Initially, it was discovered accidentally by two radio astronomers, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson. They were searching for some other thing. They never wanted to discover microwave background, but they were consistently hearing a faint noise, a noisy signal. The temperature they measured, it was around 2.7 Kelvin of that radiation. And they were awarded Nobel Prize in the year 1978 because of this discovery. So in the year 1989, in order to study this cosmic microwave background, COBE was launched, Cosmic Microwave Background Explorer. It measured the black body spectrum and it measured the temperature of this kind of cosmic microwave background. And in the year 2009, Planck Space Telescope was launched. In the year 2001, Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe was launched. They were able to discover minute variations in cosmic microwave background. And it is very, very important to understand the structure of the universe. And finally, we are coming to the radio sky. In the year 1932, Carl Jansky identified and discovered radio sources by accident. He was a radio engineer at Bell Telephone Laboratory, and he was able to make 15-meter observations. He built a large rotatable antenna, and he pointed it towards the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and he was able to discover a source of radiation outside the solar system. That source of radiation was towards the center of Milky Way galaxy in the Sagittarius constellation. So many advancements were made in radio astronomy, and they built bigger and bigger radio telescopes. As you have already seen, radio window is there all the radio waves can reach the ground-based telescopes. So they were able to build bigger and bigger radio telescopes. 1,000 feet Arecibo telescope was built in the year 1963. 2 James Bond movies were shot in this Arecibo telescope. Last year it collapsed because of some mechanical failure. Now they are trying to revive it. Then they discovered the interferometry principle. It revolutionized radio telescope. You can have many smaller radio telescope. You can combine the information through interferometric technique, and that will become a very large radio telescope. And in the year 1962 AD, Cyril Hazard was able to study a bright radio source 3C273 with Parkes Radio Telescope, Australia. And the first quasi-stellar object was discovered. You see the size comparison or the luminosity comparison with that of our sun. It is 4 trillion times more luminous than our sun, 4 trillion times more brighter than our sun. And it is an active galactic nuclei. So scientists are able to study active galactic nuclei. So they are able to study radio loud quasars. Enormous amount of energy is released when these matters are falling into supermassive black hole. So there are a lot of advancements. In the year 2009, Merlin project has been launched, which is still functional. In the year Jansky Very Large Array Telescope was 1980. It was installed. The aperture size is 36 kilometer. So they have individual 28 5-meter dishes, 25-meter dishes, right? So 28 into 25-meter dishes. And by interferometry, they are combining it, and the combined dish size is 36 kilometer. That is really very huge. And then they discovered the phenomenon of very long baseline interferometry, and they are increasing the baseline of the radio telescope. So you are able to see Japanese VLBA Space Observatory program had a baseline of 21,000 kilometer. In the year 2011, Russian Spectre or satellite was having a baseline of 2 lakh kilometer. And now we are having Atacama Large Millimeter Array Telescope in Atacama Desert, Chile. It is still operational. You have a lot of opportunity here. It is one of the driest regions of planet Earth, right? So they are studying molecules in young galaxies, protoplanetary disk, formation of planetary disk system using radio astronomy. Here comes the future project. So what are the future projects which will go online in the next couple of years, in the next decade? When you finish your BSc, when you finish your MSc, what are the future projects you can look for? So Kepler Space Probe has been again upgraded, and they are trying to measure light with Kepler-2 space probe. They are planning to launch a space probe to the nearest star, that is Alpha Centauri star system. So they will be having nano satellites, right? A satellite which will have thousands of nano satellite, very small satellite. Nano means it is not the size of nanometer, very small satellite. So these individual probes will be released. Their sails will unfurl. They have some kind of sail system. So laser light will be given in a pulsed manner from planet Earth. 1 billion laser beams will be directed at a probe. So it will create a power of 100 gigawatts. It will last for several minutes. So because of this huge power coming and hitting their sails, they will be accelerated to 1/5 of the speed of light. The nearest star is at a distance 4.2 light years. So 1/5 of that speed of light. That means it will take 4 into 5, 20 years to reach the nearest star, right? So in another 20 years, once this project is launched, we may be able to reach the nearest star system, which is also having an exoplanet, if everything goes well, right? And then it will reach the Proxima B after a voyage of more than 20 years. And then it will take images. It will beam back the images on a pulse of laser. It will come another 5 or 6 years from that place to this place. So that is what they are planning to do in the near future. The next wave of space telescopes not only include space-based telescope, but also ground-based telescope. So you are having Subaru telescope. The start date is already on, and it will be launching. It will be active even in the distant future. Then you have European extremely large telescope, which is 16 times as sharp as a legendary Hubble Space Telescope. Now you see it is having a mirror size of 39.3 meter. You have Giant Magellan Telescope. It is having a mirror size of 25.5 meter. The observation start date is 2029 AD. The next wave of space telescope will also include 30-meter telescope. It will be based in Hawaii, and the start date is 2027 AD. The next wave of space telescope will also include large synaptic space telescope. It may start operational activities in the next year if everything goes well. Then you have square kilometer array. The radio telescope baseline is 1 million kilometer. So that is huge baseline. And the observation start date is 2027 AD. It is going to be situated in South Africa and also in Australia. And by interferometric technique, they will make a radio telescope which is supposed to have 1 lakh kilometer dish. Then you have TESS, Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, which is already operational, and it will be operational even in the near future. James Webb Space Telescope. Scientists are eagerly waiting to see James Webb Space Telescope. It is the successor to Hubble Space Telescope. It will be doing its imaging activity in visible and IR region. The start date will be either this year or next year. WIFIRST, Wide Field Infrared Survey Telescope, and it will be using gravitational lensing concept. It will be started in the year 2025. Starshade. So it will try to view an exoplanet directly. It is still in developmental stage. New Worlds mission. It will be trying to build a large occulter in space to block the intense starlight, and it will try to observe exoplanets with ease in the near future. And for the final talk of my day, I will conclude in another 5 minutes. How to get there? So much of space telescopes are there. So much of activities are there. So much of objectives are there. How I can get there? In order to go to these kind of space observatories, we need to have very good academic marks, consistent academic performance with no history of arrears, and an undying passion to go to these kind of places. Friends, let me tell you, if you have consistent 60% and above percentage, you will go there. Of course, for big institutions like Harvard, Oxford, maybe you need 80% mark. But for all other universities, this mark is enough, sufficient. One of my student from MSc, he had a percentage around 60 to 62. Now he is working with Atacama Large Millimeter Array Telescope, radio telescope, based in Taiwan. This telescope is based in Chile. It is being operated by ESA, NASA, and other space probes. And my student is in Taiwan doing research there, taking data from ALMA matter. So you can see it is a truly international project. So you need to have an undying passion, a very good academic track record, know about the opportunities. In India, we are having a test called JEST, Joint Entrance Screening Test. So if you write this exam after MSc, in Indian astronomy observatories, you can go. So you have Giant Meter Wave Radio Telescope, you have Gamma Ray Astronomy Serenco Experiment Grace. In India, you have Astro Satellite, which is going to be launched very soon. And we have Radio Telescope in Ooty. You have Sun Observatory at Kodaikanal. You have Optical Observatory at Kavalur, and also in Himalayan region. So many opportunities are there in India itself. And you have to also write GATE if you want to go to IITs for studying all these kind of phenomenon. You need to write CSIR net and clear the JRF exam in order to get a stipend. For abroad opportunities, some of the Western universities are demanding graduate record exam, test of English as a foreign language, IELTS, Pearson test of English, and so on. So they are demanding this kind of competitive exams. Some of the universities, not all the universities, you have to understand that. Western universities in particular, they may demand these kind of exams, right? But if you have very good academics, if you have very good credentials, even without the exams, you can go there. So you develop your extra qualities. There are many online courses. Choose the best ones and do online courses on astronomy. You can complete one online course per one semester in astronomy. That will mean you will study 6 in 3 years when you are studying BSc, minimum of 4 when you are studying MSc in 2 years. One online course per one semester. That is more than sufficient. You have to learn computer programming, especially Python programming. There are 1 or 2 other astronomy related softwares which you may need to learn. Learn data processing. You are collecting huge amount of data. Attend summer and winter internship. Unfortunately, down south, we are completely unaware of all these things, except for few students, except for few colleges. Most of the colleges, they are unaware of summer internship, winter internship, online training school, online summer or winter schools. Try to attend this kind of summer internship program. And very important, you need to have a very good recommendation letter. When you are applying for these kind of institutions, you need to have 2 or 3 pages minimum recommendation letter. So you need to develop your academic activities. You have to go and participate in competition. You have to go and present a paper in some seminars or attend a seminar. Increase the CV, the weight in your curriculum vitae. That will create a very good recommendation letter. Try to get one recommendation letter from your BSc class teacher, one from your MSc class teacher. That will speak volumes about your commitment towards research, your intellectual quality, your academic activity, right? Then hard work is definitely needed when you want to apply for foreign university PhD programs. Even if there is no reply, you please apply, right? So consistent and persistent, persevered efforts will bring great rewards. If you have commitment, if your attitude is very good, if you have the skill, if you have the hard work, you will definitely succeed. You will reach astronomical height. The sky will be within your reach, right? So thank you for your patient listening. I am sorry I have taken 5 minutes extra. So do you have any questions? If you have any questions, you can unmute and ask. Otherwise, I will try to answer from the chat box. If you have any questions, you can unmute and ask. Over to the program organizers.
Dear participants, now I would like Dr. Prem Anand to give the introduction about the chief guest. Followed by that, we will have the questions. If you have any questions, type the questions in the chat box. Then we will read the questions on behalf of you to the chief guest, Dr. Khanna. So if you have any question, please type them now. Now I call upon Professor Dr. Prem Anand to give the introduction about the chief guest.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Khanna, for your wonderful, simple, lucid presentation. And at this time, I would like to introduce the resource person, Dr. D. Khanna. So Dr. D. Khanna joined the Department of Physics in Karunya University in the year 2009. He joined for his doctorate degree in the Department of Physics, Bharathiar University. Soon after, he completed Masters in Physics from the same department in the year 2003. He completed his doctorate in Environmental Radiation Physics in the year 2009. And he was also studying about the sources and causes of natural background radiation in and around Kudangulam nuclear power plant site for his work. His current research interests include studying the behavior of naturally occurring radionuclides and anthropogenic radionuclides in the environmental, medical, and radiation physics. So he has 8 years of teaching experience and 14 years of research experience. And his teaching areas include applied physics, engineering physics, astrophysics, mathematical physics, nuclear and particle physics. And his his research interests include environmental radiation physics. He has published a number of national and international journals. To quote a few, he has published nearly some 25 journals, national and international journals. And he has participated in the refereed conference proceedings to a number of 10. And he attended workshop, seminar, and faculty development program to a tune of 18 in number. And he also attended the conferences, many conferences. He has conducted many number of workshops and conferences. For example, he has organized National Conference on Luminescence and its application held at Bharathiar University. And he also conducted National Conference on Nanomaterials in the year 2010 and 2012 at Karunya University. And he has a professional membership in the Institute of Physics, London, England, Indian Society for Radiation Physics, Luminescence Society of India, Indian Association of Physics Teacher, Indian Physics Association. And finally, he has a number of awards. To quote a few, he was awarded the best oral paper presentation at the National Conference on Luminescence held in Bangalore in the year 13. And he was awarded Junior and Senior Research Fellowship by the Board of Research in Nuclear Sciences in the Department of Atomic Energy. He also won the second prize at the national level in the All India Nuclear Essay Competition held by the Department of Atomic Energy. And he was also the best outgoing student in BSc Physics and in the 10th standard. And he also is a finalist in the state level elocution, essay, and science exhibition competition. So we are pleased to have Dr. D. Khanna, and I also, on the behalf of the Department of Physics and faculty members, I wholeheartedly congratulate Dr. D. Khanna for his wonderful lucid presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the very kind introduction.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Khanna, sir, there are some questions in the chat box.
Yes, sir.
Shall I read it or?
You can read it, sir. No problem.
Yes, sir. Sir, can any one of the telescopes provide information about the Higgs field? It was the latest question.
Okay. So I am reading just the first question. Okay, let me quickly answer that, and let me come back to this question.
Okay, sir. Okay.
How powerful is the James Webb Space Telescope from HST? So both are having different mechanisms with respect to the wavelength region they are studying. Hubble Space Telescope, as I have told you, it is from ultraviolet to very near infrared, whereas James Webb Space Telescope will be exclusively in infrared as well as some part of the visible light. The size comparison is totally different. Hubble Space Telescope is like a mini truck or a mini bus. It's that much huge, whereas James Webb Space Telescope is very big. It is half the size of Boeing 737 flight. So the size comparison is also hugely different. So with reference to resolution power, of course, James Webb Space Telescope is going to be much powerful, and you'll be seeing the difference, right? Hopefully you have seen the image created by Hubble Space Telescope with regards to Pluto. At least this will be few times more powerful than Hubble Space Telescope with regards to capturing the image of Pluto. And when we see the other galaxy images, the resolution power will be increased because the optics has increased tremendously since the time of launch of Hubble Space Telescope. So it is going to be a really very powerful one. Very importantly, the size of Hubble is nearly 13.2 meters long. Its maximum diameter is nearly 4.2 meters. The primary mirror diameter is 2.4 meters, something I remember. James Webb Space Telescope will be 22 meters by 12 meters. Now that is huge size, all right? And it is going to be more powerful. Can a star turn into a planet? That is a question which has been asked. Can a star turn into a planet? Stars will never turn into a planet. There is a reverse theory. Jupiter, they are considering as a failed star. But stars, at the end of their lifetime, they will either become a white dwarf star or a neutron star and a black hole after a supernova explosion. So once a star is born, it cannot become a planet. It cannot be demoted. All right. So is it possible to watch more and more giant galaxies beyond our observable universe through modern telescope? It's a very interesting question. It also keeps me awake during nighttime. We are going to have much powerful telescopes in the near future. So far, we have seen up to 13.4 billion light years away from the planet here. We have resolved those kind of galaxies. Some 100 years before, when small telescopes were there, we were not even able to resolve Andromeda galaxy, which is 2.2 million light years away from planet here. Now we are seeing much more deeper into space, 13.4 billion light years. What will happen if we have more powerful telescope? Are we going to resolve the structure of those galaxies? This is one question. Are we going to see beyond those galaxies? So because of gravitational telescope, gravitational lensing, we were able to see a telescope which is 13.7 billion light years away. Very faint telescope. So you have a cluster of galaxies. The gravity is bending the light from behind. So you are able to see few galaxies here and there, which is behind the cluster of galaxies at a great distance. Are we going to see those galaxies also? So that is a very interesting question. We are still waiting to hear. Once we have the data, we'll be able to tell it. We have bigger galaxies even within the observable universe. Giant galaxies even within the observable universe. So will we have more bigger galaxies? Will we have bigger galaxies beyond the current observable limit? We don't know. So we have to wait for the result. Okay. So that is a nice question. I really like. Okay. So there is a request from one of the participants to share the PowerPoint. Yeah, of course, I will give the PowerPoint to Melvin David, sir. and he can share it with all the participants. Okay. And okay, I am trying to see some more questions. Okay. Is there any possibility to write a review article based on the specific astronomy like UV or infrared and go for publication of the same? Whenever you are writing review article, the scientific publishers will look into two aspects. Are you working in that field? Have you published at least one journal in that field? If it is so, it is going to be accepted very quickly. Otherwise, top journals may not accept your journal publication. And whenever you are writing review articles, you have to start from the initial to the latest one, and you have to write like a story how it all developed. So you have to do that. And if you do that, there is a possibility for writing a review article. If you are again working in that particular field, you have a greater chance of publishing that article. There are many journals. Which are the journals in which astronomical data are getting published? There are many journals in which these things are getting published. So you have to search. If you are having a phenomenal discovery, it may be even published in Nature, but there are specific astrophysics journals, so they can get published there. Is there any software to calculate astronomical data? So I have talked with a few of my astronomy friends. They are telling that learn Python programming and the rest of the things will follow. So my humble suggestion will be start with Python programming. Then there is a course called Data-Driven Astronomy. There is an online course called Data-Driven Astronomy. When you go and learn from there, you will have more idea about which software you can use for analyzing the astronomical data. Are there any future telescope projects in India? Of course, we are having some plans like GRACE, what I was telling, Gamma Ray Astronomy Saranko experiment in Gamma Ray region. We already have a meter wave telescope, giant meter wave radio telescope. We have a solar observatory. We have radio astronomy center at Uti. So we have optical observatory at Kavalur and also in Himalayan region. They are planning few projects in the near future like AstroSat, which will be launched into space and which will be studying from space, right? UV, X-rays, these kind of things. We are having many things packed into one single satellite. So there are a few projects which are coming online.
So the voice is not audible.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is audible. Kanna sir, one small
Okay.
request. There are many questions in the chat box. Could you
Okay.
able to answer all these questions, sir?
Okay, I will answer shortly and quickly.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Your
How
voice
to
is audible, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How to start a new journey of astronomical research for a person in material science or any other physics field? Is there a chance to start over again in astronomical research? Of course, there is a chance. In foreign countries, they do not have this kind of distinction. If you have selected a particular field, you have to be with that particular field till you die. That kind of strict rules are not there in foreign countries. If you want to switch over, you can switch over. But again, you have to put in another 3 to 4 years of effort in order to start again. It is possible. Kindly suggest some good books in astronomy. So I have a very kind suggestion that you can see a book called Telescopes in my hand, and it is a very small book. It is not a very big book, and it is from Oxford University Press, and it is titled as A Very Short Introduction. So you please search for A Very Short Introduction, books in astronomy. You will have nearly 10 to 20 books, very cheap. This book is only 225 rupees. So if you go for popular books, those books will be 5,000, 10,000. It will be very costly. Some encyclopedias will be very cheap, but other astronomical books will be very costly. So you can start with small volumes like this, right? Increase your knowledge in astronomy. Okay. What about the recent picture of a black hole? So recently there was a picture of a black hole by Event Horizon Radio Telescope. Right, it is an international collaboration. It is not the idea of one scientist. It is an international collaboration. By giving some false color image to the black hole, they have created that kind of image. Right, it is not a real photograph per se. You see, if you want to take a photograph, you take your camera and you click, image is saved. It is not like that. So they collect the radiation from around the black hole. They create a false color image, and that is how that image is formed. And it is in the Sagittarius A. If I am okay, I have to check that which black hole they took the image. What is the name of the black hole in our galaxy? Yeah, I mixed this and that. The name of the supermassive black hole in the center of our Milky Way galaxy is Sagittarius A. So that is the name they have given to the supermassive black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy. Okay. Another question I have already answered. Future telescope plan of India. Okay. In gamma ray astronomy, they have many plans. I have heard about 5 plans in gamma ray astronomy alone, but it needs huge investment. They are still waiting for investment from the central government. Once it is through, they will go ahead with all those kind of advancements in gamma ray astronomy. Is there any telescope working based on robotic technology? Most of the space telescopes are working on their own, right? We are simply getting data from them. And the way they move the telescope on planet Earth, huge amount of engineering technology is involved. It is not only telescope, right? The optics involved in that, all those things are really very huge. I have not covered any of those things in today's lecture because of want of time. I wanted to give an overview of all the telescopes which were there, which are operating now, which are going to come in the future, so that you can understand about the unlimited opportunities you are having in the field of astronomy. So if you want to create a novel telescope which can act on their own, it is also possible. In the future, it is also possible. Okay, Higgs field. So Higgs field is a very interesting thing, right? It is coming with particle physics. So according to standard model of particle physics, the particles are not having any mass. The mass of the particles are 0. So then what is giving particles their mass? They interact with some field called Higgs field and Higgs boson, and they gain their mass. That is what is known about the Higgs field. Telescopes will not give any information about Higgs field. I'm not very sure, because you have to smash 2 particles head on with trillions of electron volt energy in order to create Higgs boson, in order to detect the Higgs boson. But telescopes, how can they give? You need to have particle detectors around the place where you are colliding 2 particles. I'm not very sure about this, right? Maybe I will refer and I will come back to you. But to the best of my knowledge, there are no telescopes which will provide some information about particle physics. Of course, many information about particle physics, cosmic rays, muon decay, all those things are available by bubble chamber studies and all those things which were taken above the atmosphere. But Higgs field is something to do with particle physics, mass. Okay, so how the picture of black hole was taken, I have already explained that. With the help of radio telescopes, they have done that. and lot of other coalitions were there also, right? What happens when all the stars turn into a black hole? Not all the stars will turn into black hole according to current theory of stellar physics. Only stars which are massive, when they come to the end of their life, they will explode as a supernova remnant. And if the remaining thing is having more mass than the Chandrasekhar mass limit, that will turn into a black hole, right? German X-ray space telescope captures most complete map of the black holes. What is your comment? Okay, I am not very sure about which space telescope you are talking about. I have to refer and tell. This is a question which I am not very sure. I will refer my own PPT. X-ray telescope, right? Okay, so X-ray telescope, Compton Gamma Ray Spectrometer, GAL, ESA, COSB, Fermi, Swift. Okay, Einstein, Rosat. Okay, so X-ray multi-mirror mission. If I'm not very sure about this one. Okay, so I will refer and I will tell. So we can say that they capture the photon energy, right? That is the thing what telescopes can do. They receive the photon energy. So you have to see which photon energy you are talking about. If you are talking about the photon energy which are very closely associated with black holes, then that is possible. The photon energy of German X-ray space telescope and whatever you are talking about.
Kanna sir,
Yes,
sorry
sir.
for interruption. Could
Yes,
you please post your email ID in the chat box, sir, so that the participants can contact you if they have any queries?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will do that. So my email ID is davidkanna@cornea.edu.
Dear participants, sorry for the interruption. So you can ask your question to Professor Kanna sir, so he can answer you immediately. I hope so. Due to the time constraint, we would like to do this. So now,
Yes,
I call upon any one of the participants to tell your feedback. So if anybody wants to give your feedback, you can raise your hand so that we can unmute yourself. If any participant wants to give the feedback, you can raise your hand so that we will unmute you. So you can tell the feedback about the today's program. Okay, so I'll give this opportunity to Mr. Saurav Natta. Please wait a minute, I'll unmute you. Mr. Saurav Natta, I think you can proceed now. If you wish, you can switch on the video also. Saurav Natta, you can unmute your mic, then you can tell the feedback.
Saurav Natta doesn't have any question, it seems. He posted in the chat box.
Okay. So if anybody wants to tell your feedback about this program, you can now tell your feedback. Otherwise, we can move to vote of thanks session. Okay, thank you, participants. Thank you, participants. Now I call upon Lourdes Silcia for the final program.
Thank you sir, for your clear answers to our keen participants. Now it's time for Thanksgiving. In everything, give thanks. Now I invite Master Darcius Anthony Joe of 3rd BSc Physics to express the words of gratitude.
No duty is more urgent than that of returning thanks. Good afternoon to all. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this memorable occasion. Let me first of all start by giving glory to Almighty God for making today's occasion a resounding success. Prayer don't have to be long and eloquent, that need only to come from a sincere and humble heart. I would like to thank our beloved principal, Reverend Dr. Mariadas S.J., for his soulful prayer and all his words of wisdom that radiated a source of energy within us. We will ever remain grateful to you, and we thank you for being with us today. My heartfelt thanks to the head of the department, Dr. D. Premanand, the coordinator, Dr. R. Mary Janila, and the moderator, Dr. M. Melvin David Kumar, for their valuable contribution, guidance, and encouragement in all our efforts. I thank our special guest, Dr. D. Kanna, MSc PhD, Assistant Professor of Cornea Institute of Technology and Science, Coimbatore, who despite his busy schedule and found time to grace this occasion and making us to know more about space telescope and opportunities in that field. Next, I would thank all our department staff members, Dr. S.G. Regit, Dr. M. Agustin, Dr. L. Arunjos, Mr. R. Kristuraja, who worked hard to make this webinar a great success. Next, I would thank all the student participants and faculty members from the various colleges without whom the program is meaningless. Last but not least, I thank you all my friends for your cooperation in making this webinar a great success. Finally, I leave you this inspiring quote. Someday, everything will make a perfect sense. For now, laugh at the confusion, smile through the tears, and keep happen for a reason. Thank you.